My lords, are we living in a simulation? Today I'm going to discuss what I shall refer to as fourth wall breaks. During our documentation and archiving of all galactic records, we have discovered that there are several references to something or someone outside of our galaxy, watching us, perhaps playing with us. Most disturbingly, it may be that we are living in a simulation, and nothing is real. I'll take a minute to briefly explain what the fourth wall is. The fourth wall is a performance convention in which an invisible imaginary wall separates actors from the audience. While the audience can see through this wall, the convention assumes that the actors act as if they cannot. In our case, we assume that maybe we are the actors and we are being watched and simply unaware of it. Perhaps events are forced upon us and how we react to them is studied. It is most disturbing indeed to think that the Commonwealth is simply at the behest of some omnipotent being pulling our galactic strings. Do we even have free will, or is it simply an illusion? This is quite the rabbit hole to dive down, and I shall detail our understanding of events for you now. The first item to discuss is most disturbing, where if I am interpreting it correctly, I think it may be a sign that the controller of our simulation is somewhat fed up with its quality and wants to delete it and perhaps remake it from scratch. A 2.0, if you will. A new engine. What this would mean for us, who knows? I'm speaking of the records relating to an empire who goes down the route of Cosmogenesis. Some of the reports from the records are remarkably specific, and I shall detail some of the key ones for you now. They read: to glean meaning from the innards of reality requires a new kind of science, a new kind of computer. So far, our experiments have been conducted on the smallest scale, and any edits were quickly erased as reality reverted to its default setting. We suspect this is a problem of size. No matter the risk, there is no turning back. Only those who dare to break the rules will ever be able to rewrite them. It cannot be, and yet it is. No matter what we try, our edits to reality remain stubbornly temporary. This universe is simply too old for the changes to take hold. But in the midst of frustration, there may at times be opportunity, and a new experiment has yielded unexpected results. We have long known about other dimensions. The means to travel there reliably has eluded us. Not anymore. Younger universes dwell within the infinite galaxy of the singularity. These have proven far more flexible. Deep down in the abyss of the multiverse, we will find a malleable reality to shape into something extraordinary. This reality is flawed, marred by entropy, physical needs and violence. While we cannot change it, we can leave it behind. Let us enter the unknown and find a young universe where our edits to reality will hold. Let us shape it into perfection. And finally, should an empire take the horizon needle and enter a black hole in the Great Wound system? This is wonderful. This universe has barely begun to expand. The fabric of this dimension is like soft clay, ours for the shaping. We will start small, but edit after edit we will mould this place into a haven. Now, there is a fair amount of text to break down here, but the key context for me is the continued reference to the requiring of a new type of science, and that our universe is old, difficult to edit and change. This ultimately means travelling to a new, fresh universe will make everything much better and easier. Of course, despite this, and given the records, it may just relate to some sort of multiverse rather than a simulation, for the endings for Cosmogenesis empires are not necessarily pleasant. Should an empire enter the black hole of a defeated dimensional horror, nothing good will come of it. We have the following report intercepted from an empire who did just that, which reads: coming here was a terrible mistake. It is nearly impossible to describe. Darkness and brutal nightmare. A sick, sweeping malevolence that permeates the very fabric of space. For now the horizon needle offers shelter, Edit after frenzied edit, we work to ward off most of the surrounding madness. But the coordinated assaults on our defences betray a singular intent. Malignant mind bent on our destruction. One misstep could mean death, or worse. Can we hold on long enough to save ourselves? At home we were like gods. Here we simply struggled to survive. So, my lords, although I believe Cosmogenesis has several key messages and perhaps an overall theme, i.e. our universe is indeed difficult to edit and perhaps failing, perhaps the simulation, if one does exist, is dying, we must wonder, does this mean that it will be replaced by something newer and better? And most importantly for us, is that the wish of the masters of this simulation? If only we knew the truth. I do, however, think it is telling that the Great Wound system, which we documented to be a uniquely broken and destroyed star system, apparently leads to such paradise. According to the text, a literal haven for the escaping empires. Why is that? Do we have to break our universe to reach paradise? Food for thought, indeed. The next event to discuss relates to the enigmatic observers, i.e. the Xenophilic Fallen Empire. This is, ironically I think, one that many believe is a fourth wall break, and an indication that we are living in a simulation. I in fact disagree with this, and I'll explain why. But first, you need to know that they've sent us several messages over the years, and the first one reads, "Don't break the fourth wall, you clever child, you." As we discussed at the beginning, the fourth wall is the invisible wall that separates the audience from the performance. I believe that to the enigmatic observers, the entire galaxy is an elaborate performance for which they watch with great interest. They occasionally interfere with the galaxy in small ways, but mostly they just watch, treating the whole galaxy like a huge reality show or science experiment. Thus, when they tell you not to break the fourth wall, they are essentially trying to politely tell you to stop communicating with them, as they would much rather observe you than interact with you. They are the audience, and you are the element of the performance. At least, that's one theory, and I think it fits the narrative. Thus, although on initial reading I could understand why one thinks that they are aware of the simulation theory, I don't believe they do, and this is supported in my opinion by a second message, which reads, "All the world's a stage, and all the humans merely players. You are a player, are you not?" And a third message, "The damage you cause is beginning to grow from fascinating to troubling. Watch yourselves, because we are always watching." And finally, a fourth message, "You have ceased to amuse. Your little game will soon be over." Thus, it is my opinion that despite the Xenophiles directly mentioning the fourth wall and calling us a player, the context is not of that of a simulation, and they are perhaps just as in the dark as everybody else. Which brings us to our final and by far the most compelling piece of evidence that we are in fact living in a simulation. The 12-million-year-old precursor race known as the Vultuam Star Assembly, who in a hitherto unprecedented level of mass hysteria killed themselves in an attempt to break free of the simulation that their entire population, billions of aliens, believed that they were a part of. I shall detail our discovery of the Vultuam and discuss the events leading up to their demise. The Vultuam were a race of worm-like annelids, approximately 3 to 4 meters in length, who communicated primarily through vibrations carried along their segmented bodies. They were remarkably long-lived, having an average lifespan of approximately 270 Earth years. The Vultuam ignored the conventionally popular field of artificial intelligence, instead focusing exclusively on virtual realities and massive computer simulations, or for lack of a better description, video games. How these simulations were maintained and operated without the appropriate computing power of an AI is quite beyond us. In any case, a substantial amount of information regarding their culture comes from ancient copies of these games. One in particular stands out. According to their records, it was a multi-user virtual reality game enjoyed by billions of the population across the Empire. It was a role-playing game, where one could assume the persona of whoever they wished and explore this virtual galaxy, leveling up their skills and equipment. Quite amusing really, when you consider that the Vultuam could literally go outside and explore the galaxy in their ships. But as I said, most of what we know about the Vultuam comes from these video games. However, we also discovered several ancient beacons designed to relay a quite unusual message. It seems that at some point in the Vultuam development, they became obsessed with what they call the true existence. These beacons detail the instructions that sentient beings must disconnect from the reality that they're currently imprisoned within. This obsession appears to have become a religion of sorts, or at very least, a philosophy. The evidence does suggest that not all in the Vultuam society followed the philosophy. We have dig sites showing a splinter group who firmly did not follow this dominant doctrine. Interestingly, they seem to have existed beyond the wider collapse of Vultuam society. As we dug more into the Vultuam culture, it seemed that at almost every turn their settlements followed a similar path. They were destroyed, but it wasn't by war or disease. It seemed like self-destruction was the culprit, ranging from orbitable stations, mining facilities, and outer colonies. All were destroyed, often by antimatter bombs deliberately detonated by the Vultuam themselves. It was not until we finally identified and explored their homeworld that we understood the true extent of the Vultuam's descent into madness. Their homeworld was ravaged by a number of massive antimatter explosions and gave us the information we required to finish their story. Approximately a century before their extinction, the Vultuam experienced a radical shift in ideology to this doctrine of true existence. How they came upon the notion remains unclear. However, this new philosophy posited that the entire universe they occupied, the very one that we live in, was an artificial reality which all sapient beings had been unwittingly plugged into for the amusement of some higher power. The Vultuam undertook increasingly radical attempts to forcefully disconnect from this simulation, most of which involved mass suicide. The Vultuam finally concluded that only the simultaneous disconnection of billions of individuals would destabilize the system enough to grant them freedom. At an agreed upon hour, Vultuam across the galaxy killed themselves by any means available, often in the form of gigantic antimatter bombs. The small amount of Vultuam who saw through the madness and refused to take part in the mass suicide event proved ultimately to be too few to repopulate the species, and so the Vultuam faded into obscurity and eventual extinction. But the tale of the Vultuam doesn't end there. As bizarre as it may sound, one of our lead scientists, who it must be noted was slightly maniacal, believed the Vultuam may have been onto something, and we acquired a device found on their homeworld which was a relic of sorts. The relic was named the Vultuam Reality Perforator, which when activated, for an instant, the fabric of the universe appears to contort and expand around the ancient relic, as reality as we know it slowly reasserts itself. A brief window appears where some of the rules can be rewritten. We currently have no idea how this relic works, but clearly there were more secrets to be discovered, so we delved, and we went as deep as we could go into the Vultuam history. The Vultuam were the undisputed masters at computing and virtual worlds, and we were able to use their findings to dramatically aid our own research in these fields. Their conclusions, however, were troubling. At first glance, they appeared to have been fundamentally flawed nonsense, but upon deeper inspection, this true existence and simulation theory may have some truth behind it. We continued to dig. The Vultuam clearly found something that shattered their reality. We wanted to find out what it was. Several months later, we had our answer. It seemed that the Vultuam may have been correct after all. We replicated their experiments and came to similar conclusions. There is a moderate chance that we are in fact existing within a simulated world. We do not have enough data to hypothesize why someone would create such a thing. Surely no one would create a universe as cruel and cold as this one for simple enjoyment. Further to this disturbing revelation, I regret to inform you, my lords, that the entire science team leading this research did not take well to this news at all. The notes they left behind drift off into mad ramblings before coming to the decision to continue the research, shortly before committing suicide. So, my lords, this is the most clear and obvious indication that we are indeed living inside a simulation. These implications are profound indeed, and I yield to your discretion as to our next steps. What do you want me to do? Should we tell our citizens and risk what happened to the scientists happening to them? Frankly, perhaps I shouldn't have told you. Or, my lords, do we suppress the information? The ignorance may be indeed a bliss regarding this topic. I eagerly await your thoughts.